You have to wait until Charlie shows.
Usually it only takes a second, they start to file in, if they're there.
Oh, does the recording what actually lets you see the attendees? Or?
It's only when we go live that the attendees start to show up.
Okay.
They get the message saying the meeting hasn't started yet until I do this, I forget what it's called, That's great. That was good, yeah.
Okay,
Just take a second. But they just have that okay on their side, just to make sure they've got that pop-up would have done it. Hi, Charlie, can you hear us?
Hello, everybody. Hi, Andy. Hi, Rick. Caitlin.
Brian, I allowed you to talk, but I also tried to promote you to, as a panelist if you're able to do that. Otherwise, feel free to.
Yeah, I'm on as panelist. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Oh, looks like Brian got it. Good. Brian, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me now, Andy?
Great, perfect, thank you. Just want to make sure we're great. Thanks all.
okay, we'll call the meeting for the April 17th planning board meeting to order and begin with a roll call. Alden Clark.
Here.
Beth Delisle is not here. Bob Cope.
Here.
Jenny Pennington is absent. Heather Rogers is absent. Charlie Polisano.
Here, present.
Brian Balcom.
Here.
And Rick Taylor is here. So we have a quorum. So we have no hearings before us. I guess the first thing would be to approve the minutes of the April 3rd meeting. I sent in some comments.
I didn't.
You didn't?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to add or correct in the minutes?
I was fine with them.
Okay, great. In that case, I'll call the roll call to, actually, I need a motion first. Thank you.
Move to approve the minutes with amendments?
Okay,
Second.
second by Bob, okay. Alden Clark,
Yes.
Bob Cope,
Yeah.
Charlie Palmisano,
Yes.
Brian Balcom,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So the minutes are approved. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, the remaining item of business is, I believe the only item we have left is discussion of MBTA zoning and potentially Story Avenue, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Take it away.
Okay, just for the record, Andy Ford, Director of Planning and Development. Just to recap, I just threw on the screen just the summary slide that we've gone over before about the report's obligation. And as a reminder, the focus has been on the total unit capacity because that's the area that we don't currently, the other, a number of the other areas we already addressed or very easily addressed with the 40R district. So we've been focused on the remaining, the balance of the unit capacity and discussing where it should zone other areas of the city outside of the 40R district that exists today. So with that being said, I did distribute, and I know you all haven't had a chance to digest it, but I did distribute to planning board members, the city council we discussed last night with those who were in attendance, and the zoning advisory group is meeting tomorrow afternoon to talk about the same subject matter, which is essentially this spreadsheet, and I'll blow this up and speak to it briefly just to give you an idea what's in here, and then just briefly show the maps that are relevant. And then I think it's more about the discussion of which of these options you have any strong feelings about one way or the other, or have a preference for, or if you have any questions or concerns. And we're trying to hone in on the option that's best for Newburyport. And thank you for Councilor Shannon for both being there last night as well as attending tonight. So in essence, just as a reminder, this worksheet, so this PDF, by the way, which is posted on the website, it is distributed in your emails. It has basically bookmarks in it so that what should go up when you first open it, you'll see is this page here, the first page, which is the table, and the rest of the pages are all maps, which I'll skim through in a second. each of these, unit capacity options, I just put on that worksheet we've been using. And then I added in, corresponding letters to make it easier to identify. We don't have to use these long titles to describe each option. This is A through J at this point. The last two being, a new MBTA compliant district as opposed to an expansion of 40R. So the 40R expansions are listed in this first section, this first blue bar. Second blue bar is new MBTA sub-district. So with that, you can either click on those bookmarks or you can click on one of these letters and it'll take you to the map that's being discussed, or the area that's discussed, which is the purple highlighted lots, and the 40R district is shown as the red boundaries. The blue that you're saying is just some what was considered like excluded land, wetlands and whatnot. So at any rate, the idea of this map is just giving you an idea of where we might further expand the 40R district here. There are other options that are shown in the table, and you can click on each one and or use the bookmarks on the side. The other thing I would say about this is the other area that we were discussing is further north. So connecting to the Empro area, we talked previously about that not necessarily being an expansion of the 40R. We talked about the pros and cons and how we could configure a connected district, and the pros and cons of doing it different ways. And at this point, the conversation shifted to a new district in the area. So we have two different options for that. The original, what we're calling the original Empro version 1, including the cottage court lots, and the other one is Empro version 2, which is an Empro site, including some of Low Street, crossing underneath the rail trail. So in essence, this table is summarizing that data, and in a moment, I'll just go through the maps quickly, but this is the summary table at the corner. Sorry, let me find it easier to share. Sorry. So this table here is just summarizing the overall magnitude. So we have about 862 units. We actually think it'll be closer to 930, but we're putting aside for a minute a bunch of little details and parameters about the way the state calculates it, and where the land. So in essence, we're expecting that to come out closer to 930, but we've been using the conservative lower end of that just to make sure that we're being responsible about having some buffer as we're actually having a meeting with the state next week to talk about some of the details of with the modeling works in our particular instance. So at any rate, 862, we're expecting closer to 930, but the remainder of balance is basically 430. And so if in parentheses I put here, if we needing to make 430 units or thereabouts, if we added in the Hines Way property that we talked about previously, that would reduce that to about 355. So right now we're really talking about if we include Hines Way, which I don't think anybody's arguing that we shouldn't. But the assumption is that if we start with that, we add that in. And so if that's the case, we're down to 355. That's sort of the minimum sort of gap we have to create there. So with that, then you kind of look at each row, and I'm not going to go through each one, but just to show you briefly how they work. I put letters in just to be easier to click on and kind of identify the option. We've been using these short titles, Parker Street to Grab Road with 40 Parker as sort of a descriptor of what the map is showing, but the letters are a little easier. So if you're referring to one, you can say the letters and we can go through. The potential unit capacity of that option that's shown on the map, so that's the purple lots that are highlighted. This first section here under this purple is showing if those lots were done at 20 units an acre, 30 units an acre, or 40 units an acre, which is typical kind of threshold that would be meeting the state requirement. And the last two, 30 and 40, are the ones that are used in our existing 40R district. So we were doing modeling. In some cases, the discussion was not modeled because there was not a discussion of doing that low density or that high density. Whether it's the 20 or the 40 units in some cases. So at any rate, where it says not modeled, we didn't run through the model because nobody seemed to be interested in that scenario. So here what you're seeing is at 30 units an acre, for option A, which is those lots I showed, I'll go into in a second, 905 units essentially that could be produced out of that, or the higher end, we have to discuss that further stage at 981. So again, being conservative, at 40 units an acre, that goes up, and so it gets very close, 1208, gets very close to what we need in the state.
That's the total for that area, so it's way over.
Correct, yes, with just that area, sorry, with just that area. Yeah, exactly. So that being the case, we then go down to the red section here, purple, sort of pinkish red. And that section is adding to the higher number that we just saw here, this existing 40R number. So we're sort of taking our base of the 40R, adding it to the option in this column, which is modeled at either 30 or 40 units an acre, which is the 905, 1208. And then as you add it in, you get to these numbers down here, and then the yellowish, row here is actually showing, once you've done that, what's the net difference? Is there a negative number means that we've exceeded the requirement here, substantially, as you can see in this one. This one has exceeded it by 72 units, and, by way of example, so in this scenario, doing just, this Emperor one by itself, and here we're still about 360 units short, so in essence, that's just giving an idea for each of those map options. If those particular lots are included, that's what the scenario would be. Most of the options A through A through G are along Parker Street heading toward the business park. And the last one we spoke of is the Heinz Way piece. And then we have these other two that I've characterized separately because they're not really a smart growth district expansion. At this point, they would be a separate MBTA sub-district. So that would be the MPRO 1 and MPRO 2 components of it. So two illustrations. One is this is the business park adjacent to the 40R district. And there's some of the section of the predominant portion of discussion that we've had in recent days has been about using Parker Street here, the lots basically that front along Parker Street, and some of these lots, or all these lots, or none of these lots, but somewhere in here, and then also focus particularly on this MPRO area up here, using MPRO site and potentially some of Low Street here. There's also the Heinz Way piece, which I'm putting aside for a moment, assuming that we're just getting the state to correct the data, add that in there, take credit for it, and that sort of reduces the number we need to create. So that's just a contextual map. But the optional maps, just to show you briefly, and then we can leave it to you and the chair how you want to handle the discussion. But just to give you an idea of the maps for each of those. So just running from A, down. So Parker Street, this is the Mark Ritchie site. The turbine is right here. This is the Back Bay neighborhood. 40R district is right here, and 1 and 3 Boston Way. And so really we're talking about these lots right here along the whole stretch on both sides fronting the street. In this scenario, it does not include the Mark Ritchie site, but goes down to the corner. We did have some fair amount of debate about whether or not something was happening here would come to the corner, whether it would go to some of these parcels or on one side of the street or not. This one is just to see what the Mark Ritchie site does by itself. Because it's a large site, it doesn't have any so-called excluded land. It ends up having a very large unit capacity from the state's perspective. These are the ones across the street. There was discussion about going only on the side of the street where 1 Boston Way is, contiguous there, but not Mark Ritchie's woodworking site or the other lots on that side of the street. Another variation on the theme was the jog, as I called it. So taking that same stretch, going a little further and jogging the street to come to this side, but there was a subset of the group that wasn't as keen on this side of the street being included. There was also, further discussion about that. Then there's this option, which is going down, say, 3/4 of the way down the street. You can see all these kind of variations on that theme. This one goes down, say, halfway down the street. Heinz Way is shown here. So this is just correcting the state's data and essentially getting credit for that area.
When you say correcting the state's data, I can see that the line goes through the property, but what is it, what's incorrect about the state's data?
So there are actually two things that are going on. One is the lot line adjustment
Yep,
here.
yep.
I should say three things, I should say. One is the lot line adjustment here. One is another one is the cul-de-sac here. This should actually be just treated as one large parcel. So they're treating it almost like it's a public way that's excluded. And so this is really a driveway that's shared by everybody.
So it's not a subdivision.
It's not a subdivision roadway, so this should be treated as one large parcel. And the other thing is the fact that the real problem is that because it was overlaid with when they did their whole broad brush algorithm, which is understandable for them, they overlaid with the open space layer, which had not been updated yet to recognize that the cemetery got reduced to take out the Heinz Way development that the land had been sold off. So here they were picking up on it incorrectly and labeling that lot as being not eligible for use, and so we have to have them correct that, or So those are the three things going on in that area. It's a bit of a hassle, frankly, to do, for just a relatively low number of units, but we all sort of agree that it makes sense to do it, to take credit for the area where it's already built out that way. Rather than sort of decide, where we can meet the state's requirements and then retain, full jurisdiction elsewhere, so. And the other two options were the two MPRO. So MPRO one was, no longer including the cemetery or wrapping up to the 4-yard district in some way. There was a discussion, of the Back Bay neighborhood at one point as an option, and the CVS and some kind of, configuration up there. But we don't get a lot of credit for some of these lots because they're really small, the way the calculations work. And there's a whole lot of debate that might be had about, overlaying a district like this, having it absorbed into other MBTA communities, state guidelines. In an area like this, it might be a little bit different than other areas. So there's more involved with a discussion like that, and nobody seemed to be interested in that, going that route. So that option was raised by one, was put
So,
aside.
and that one would also, because we're not allowed to cut lots, we have to include the entire cemetery to connect the districts.
Correct. Although I am sorry, agreed 100%. I was also referring though to Councilman Colley's option of using the Back Bay and how.
So not even connecting.
Yeah, how in that scenario, he was suggesting a larger set of lots that are not, we're going beyond this screen here. And that all the way down to the courthouse, basically, with that whole Cherry Street sort of area and, the street, and that would be, a sizable area, let's say, with more space to be had, but also relatively small lots that wouldn't really produce a lot of units anyway. So at any rate, long story short, there wasn't really interest in that anyway. From the rest of the group, and not others. Story Ave and Low Street are off the table, I think is the point, so they're not shown here at all. And the MPRO one was zigzagging with one and using the court, court. And MPRO two is using MPRO and going this way to grab the units that are right next to the skating rink, and then the ones that are next to Timberline are leading up to Timberline driveway here.
Is there a reason why the Timberline site and the Elks site are not considered as part of?
We had some discussion about that, and I think where we left it, so originally, we had some discussion about including those two. There was discussion, long story short, and Rick, chime in here if you want, if you feel like I'm missing something or want to correct something on something, but there was discussion about where the state is going to require the entire property, the Timberline property, to be included. Well, we could make an argument that it shouldn't need to go across the driveway, that including the Elks lot would not need to be, quote, contiguous with the adjacent lot. So long story short, not everybody was comfortable with going back to the business park, which is why this piece wasn't of interest. And then when with this driveway piece here not included, because that's part of that piece, and the state wants the whole parcel, that then brings the question of including the Elks parcel next door, because it's not connected to this district. So it's a bit of, some of it's sort of the, I want to say, arbitrary nature of the requirement here. Like, you could make an argument here for why it doesn't need to be connected properly. But we think here there are a couple of things going on. One is folks might be concerned about the infiltration of, that sort of coming south in the business park, because it's a long walk the way it goes in. The other piece was the fact that the state may not accept this, separation.
But if you use the entire Timberline property,
Yeah,
you could use the entire Elks property. And,
yeah.
Using the Timberline property seems no different than using the Parker Street properties that are part of the industrial.
I think that's a fair argument to make.
So what's the difference?
And then Rick, I don't know if from that discussion, if you recall other factors that folks were discussing, but generally speaking, there didn't seem to be interest in using this parcel. And when the question was raised about the state forcing us essentially to, include that parcel in the driveway, that led to the question of, well, maybe we should run this model because it could, potentially reach that 5-acre size, run this model without those lots, was basically the group left it. And so those lots were not modeled in it because it was assumed at that point that there wasn't as much interest in the group in going that direction.
Couple other things, in the parcel that's beside, to the right of the Timberline property, has a lot of, I think, wetland.
This one here, yeah.
And so what we were really thinking of was really focusing on properties that had frontage on Low Street rather than digging deep into the industrial park or business park. So the idea was that it was more of a cluster than it looks on the map, because the whole back of the site is unusable.
Yeah.
And probably if you try to use the Timberline site also, you'd have buffer issues there to that. That site pre-exists wetland regulations covered, but I
Right,
would
right.
suspect that if you tried to redevelop it for housing, you'd get into a situation of buffer there. And then the other big difference is that, which Andy keeps telling me, is that if we use the Parker Street site, we get the 40R benefits. If we use the Enpro site, we don't get the 40R benefits. So we get a lot more for the community in terms of affordable housing potential if we do the Parker Street projects.
Right,
if we
and
do
we
Enpro.
retain that same authority, do the same 25% elsewhere, as well as maybe more discretionary authority over the permitting. Again, I'm not saying I'm encouraging that in every instance, but we retain some authority for that elsewhere in the city, in a way that may be beneficial more so in those areas, meaning closer to High Street or, you know, some other neighborhood. To me, that seems like it might be more beneficial to the city in other areas than say, you know, one or two more parcels connected to the 40R, because, you know, again, this is my take. But it's understandable we'll have a different take on it, but my sense is that, you know, a couple of parcels being expanded, with the 40R. While it does go a little bit further into towards the business park, it is a sizable business district, so, and in my view, those are things that I think going forward, there's gonna be a lot more of an expectation and benefit mutually. Between folks looking for businesses or running businesses and wanting that housing for their employees in close proximity, so I'm not, as concerned or bothered by that. I realize there's the debate to be had about that spectrum. But given the options available and given the exclusion of Story Ave and Low Street and the sort of pros and cons of this area here, and I'm open to other ones as well. That's just where I keep coming back to as an option, sort of with the Parker Street. But and you know, if others want to throw another
I
option.
get the benefits of,
Sorry?
I get the benefits of concentrating on Parker Street from the affordable housing point of view, I guess, but I think from a planning point of view, exclusive of the numbers for a minute, do you really want to concentrate all of those 4 and 5-story residential buildings in one very densely packed area versus distributing them a little bit more, you know, around a reasonable radius from the station and, you know, having other uses mixed into the district?
I understand that. I guess I'm not
From a
necessarily.
planning point of view, I think it's.
Yeah,
a lot happening. Right
I don't
now.
know that we've discussed mixed use up here per se, so, again, it's completely understandable why people. might come
All
from
I'm saying is the
different
residential mixed with the industrial uses, with other residential types. As you get to the other side of Route 1, you know, that creates a little bit more diffuse planning diagram.
Yeah.
Versus putting all of the 4 and 5-story buildings right next to the train station.
I 100% understand what you're referring to. All I'm saying is at the end of the day is, while I recognize each of these points, and this is just my take, but as you go through each of these points, at the end of the day, unless somebody's presenting an alternative, you know, there's understandable why there's concern or preference about this or that. But unless somebody's presenting another alternative, in some area of the city or as the map, you know, district, that can comply and can reach consensus among the council and the, you know, the group here. It's not apparent to me that there's another one that's as good or as viable here overall. That's the only reason I'm coming to that Parker Street section here. I understand and I see some benefits and arguments there, you know, for sure. It's just in my view, I just am not bothered by that component of it. To me, that's not unreasonable. It's close to the transit, it's close to the employment center. This is also close in a way, it's up the rail trail, it's, you know, at the end of the business park. I'm just not, you know, it doesn't raise that flag for me as it does for some, so.
Yeah.
Could you look at?
Can I ask a question or am I supposed to raise my hand? I don't know how it works remotely.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. Actually, to Bob's point, and I understand that we're probably going to end up at the Parker Street as being, you know, the easiest and most feasible and the abbreviated time we have, right, to make these decisions. But I agree with Bob that we should insert some thinking about that corridor from the train station to Newburyport along the rail trail, like a nice bit of activity mix, maybe mixed use between that downtown. I'm sorry, between the train station and downtown, because I feel as though that could be, if we set up the zoning correctly, that could be have a very nice presence along that route And not to mention, we have the schools down the street. So I could see a lot of nice, vibrant activity. So I'm with Bob on that to at least think about it, even though we may not be able to make that choice today or soon, just something to consider.
Yeah, and again, I definitely understand that. If folks want to, we can run through the individual parcels too, but if folks wanna, make suggestions as to which parcels they might include, we can walk through how those options might work. I know that in general, the MPRO piece even doesn't do it by itself. It's not a significant number of units. So, unless someone is able to suggest, for instance, one of the issues we would have, for instance, if we're gonna do it up here is we have to use some combination presumably of these lots. And so folks would have to, I realizing. I just realized.
If you did,
folks at home may
you
not
did
see this.
the N-Pro sites, all of them up there that you're talking about.
Right, so,
And
Yeah.
you then did the multiple parcels that are on the south side of Parker, but stopping short of the
these
corner.
here,
The,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
three,
So
Yeah.
you did that
Yeah.
as an extension of the housing that's already there.
yeah,
And then you add the N-Pro sites.
Yeah.
I think,
Could we go to the
That-
the spreadsheet?
so let's talk about that alternate. Do you want to talk about that?
because that's my option as well. I think it's D, H, and J. If you put those together,
So,
so.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have to make sure we're, just refer to, let's make sure we're.
Right.
Yeah,
So we're talking about, including Heinz Way with the 40R.
Yeah.
And giving it the same stipulations as the sub parcel B.
Right, okay,
And
Yep.
then include the 3 lots on Parker Street, the
Good.
69, 75, and 77,
and is that at the
And-
30 units an acre or 40?
or 40. Do
40,
it the
okay.
same as the adjacent 40R district.
So the 250,
And then do the larger, the last M-Pro.
Yeah.
J.
Yeah.
As how you've specified it there.
yeah,
And that gives us a range, the low to high range of 1375 to 1528.
Mhm.
So I think we're covered there, and that, I think, doesn't interfere that much into the industrial park business area. And it encourages the development along the
Yeah.
trail up to the M-Pro and get some potential development there.
sure. Yeah.
So you're thinking for D, go back. to
Oh,
spreadsheet,
sorry,
please.
yeah.
It's not refreshing here for some reason.
Yeah.
So, so you're thinking D at the 5 or 4-story, 40 units per acre? Out of there?
Yeah,
I mean, couldn't we just, it seems like if we just did, we could do it with just the 30
Right.
and Heinz. If we did it with the 40 units per acre, we don't even need Heinz, right? So, because we've got 250, so we get.
Right.
So we're short, we've got, we don't even need to do Heinz.
Just depends how much of a buffer you want. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think what we're using the most conservative numbers, so we think it's gonna be a buffer anyway.
Right.
Even if we exactly hit it at 1292. So, I guess that's what I'm a little bit, I would be a little bit more concerned about. I like the idea of scaling down from the center. So as you move from the business park, you kind of move to, the 30 unit per acre and then, get up to the center point. So, and I guess the question is, so just to be clear about what you're showing on the sheet, anything that's in red takes care of it all by itself. Right?
Yeah, so
One-
each of these
one-
sell individually, whereas the other colors here, it's you add the blue
Right,
ones
so you
together.
either do
Yeah.
D, H, and J, or F, H, and F and H, right?
Yeah.
The way you've got it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like the way you're going with that. I guess I'm a little bit more concerned about the density on those three, because that's just those 3 lots.
Yeah, my only thought was, there's the plus of the affordable housing component.
Well, we get it anyway, right? The 75, well, I mean, we don't get this, if they would build to the maximum.
Yeah.
One other thing, and I just, Rick may be more cognizant of this than anybody in the room, other than me, but, I do also want to know, just be aware, and that's why I put this note up here about requires non-40R zoning. We could model the zoning up there comparable to, the 40R, but we also need to be aware if we want to do, and again, it says not to dissuade you from doing, an option with Embro, but rather just to recognize that doing that does not mean we just something on the map, we then have to talk about the zoning parameters there the same way we would do if we're starting from scratch with a new 40R district. We have to talk about what do we want those parameters to be? Is it going to be just the exact same thing as the 40R? Is it going to be something different? Because we're opening the can of worms, so to speak, or whatever we call it, but we're opening up the potential for discussion of other areas of zoning because those laws right now, depending on what we do with it, are going to be touching other definitions in zoning, other, terms and, dimensional requirements. So we need to clarify and, corral that into the MBTA requirements in some way, one way, shape, or form. It can be using the 40R sort of parameters and so forth, in a comparable way, but we also need to do that in a way that is different from just a straightforward map expansion of the 40R. So, it's not to dissuade you from, supporting that option, just be aware that that comes with more process and more debate about those parameters. One with the assumption that we can reach consensus, we don't go around in circles over that, which I unfortunately have seen over the years. And two, that we're gonna be comfortable with those active parameters at the end of the day. So, that being said, yes, we could do basically a 40R style district or some other variation of that, as long as it still conforms to the MBTA parameters in that other district.
So you're saying, Andy, that if we look at A and B, we don't have to delve into zoning language, new zoning language, right? That's what you're saying, essentially?
Yeah, in essence, that's correct. In essence, now, this one is substantially over, 475, right, substantially over, what we need to grade because this is a negative number, so, and this one here is just over, right, 72 is a little over. So yes, these are scenarios in which we would meet the requirements, here. That's not to say that's the option we should do, but it doesn't allows us to keep the 25% requirement, for example, in that district. It also allows us to keep the same 25% requirement elsewhere in the city. Because we're expanding the 40R district. One thing we lose, so to speak, if we may create a new district as opposed to using the 40R, is we're reducing our percentage of affordable units being created, which includes touching indirectly our safe harbor status. But we're basically reducing the amount of affordable units we're creating per new market rate unit, and we're not helping our subsidized housing inventory as much because we are reducing the affordable housing percentage to what MBTA communities allows rather than the 40R, which is the highest, percentage that we currently have.
So, I want to be clear about this. So anything we do in terms of zoning doesn't affect our safe harbor status until somebody builds something, correct?
Correct. We are not going to change that circumstance. Well, we can help ourselves out by getting the, streamlining, so to speak. Yes, that will make a difference until they start coming.
So it's only in a case, so it's only in a part, so we wouldn't, so if we were to do, say, 69, 75, and 77 Parker Street.
Yeah.
Zoning for 187 units, the first development that comes in wouldn't provide 187 units, it would provide some, because that's 3 lots. So we'd be dividing it. So we might get 60 lots in the first development.
Yes.
And of that, we'd have 15 units that would be affordable. Which gives us 60, it gives us 60 on the subsidized housing inventory. I guess I understand the concern about the subsidized housing inventory, but I also don't want that to drive our decision-making on planning. Yeah.
Understood, and I just want to be very clear, so that at least everybody in the room understands. Yeah. My reference to that is secondary to other considerations. I am pointing that out because if we in Newburyport do care about the zoning around the community in different areas, we need to be cognizant that the way that these statutes work is there's a gap that will be there for much longer if we are not creating any affordable units to add to that subsidized housing inventory, which means a Dexter Lane style project we heard about some time ago, or West, threat of a 40B. That is an open situation right now, and the longer that we are kept away from having that is a parameter. It is not my reason for recommending something here, but it does add to it for me, the rationale or why you might choose one option versus another.
But I guess my point is that we do all this zoning, we may not have any impact on our subsidized housing inventory for 5 or 10 years. So somebody may not develop it.
We're gonna have a couple of years right now anyways, I see it. And just to be clear, the reason why we benefit in the 40R district is not only because it's 25%, we've been lucky there where Bingo is doing rental projects, you get credit for all the units in the building. I'm not saying that creates affordable units, that it's not creating affordable units per se, those 75% are not even, meeting that threshold. But they do count for the safe harbor status. It's not to say that I prioritize one of these pieces over the other, so to speak. It's more that I'm trying to be cognizant of the landscape of different factors, and to me, on balance, this is where I come to. It doesn't mean everybody else has to come to that same place, but it's just that's where I fall on the spectrum, given all the different parameters happening simultaneously here. And we're only walking through some of those pieces here, but we're trying to cover as much ground as we can. But those things to me are informing where I'm landing overall with these different considerations simultaneously.
So Rick, this is a question for Rick. Sorry. Rick, it sounds to me like we actually have conflicting priorities, right? And we're trying to navigate that. My question to you would be, do we have different timelines for this that we should be looking at? Like, obviously we have the MBTA deadline, but yet we also have, affordable housing concerns. We're trying to walk a tightrope here, right? Is that the
Right.
understanding here?
Well, I guess the other thing I'm thinking is that we can really solve a lot of this by changing our underlying zoning to require 25% instead of 12%. Right now, if we're serious about affordable housing and serious about solving that subsidized housing inventory, we could say, you can do, especially when we do Story Avenue, which we won't do till next year, but we could say any multifamily housing that happens on Story Avenue has to be 25% affordable too.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's part of it. You're right. We do have different approaches to this.
And that is one of the inherent difficulties of this exercise, I think, partly because people have different, we just look on the screen here, just the criteria that have been discussed to date, there might be others. But that is part of the inherent, issue, is that not everybody's agreeing exactly on what the goal is here or should be here, to do for this.
And I think, to be fair, I think that, your concern is very important. But up till now, the city has not had that concern. If it had, it could have changed the zoning 10 years ago to require 25% affordable housing as part of its inclusionary housing. So it's part of this getting to consensus on some, what our goals are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you happen to think there are other criteria that aren't listed here, please feel free to chime on that as well. This is included in what I distributed, but just in case there are any others, because again, at the end of the day, hopefully we're able to, each of us, the collective, at the end of the day, point to what are what's the criteria that we use, and be able to explain that, to others. So we'll be able to use whatever the criteria are that have been cited there and explain, this is because we wanted to encourage this, or we wanted to protect that, or we wanted to, et cetera. So if there's something that you're not seeing on here that you think should be added, let us know and we can add it in there. But it goes back to the same debate, right?
Actually, just a question, do we have what is the status of any economic feasibility analysis for it?
So that hasn't been completed yet, and part of that is, it also is informed by the zoning we feel comfortable with in terms of massing or height. So, right now, it would be based on the, scenarios that have been modeled here, right, and that we're targeting. So if we had indicated thus far, as we work at MVPC, if we had indicated that we're feeling more comfortable with a 30 units per acre rather than a 20, or 40 units an acre rather than say 30, that is what's going to be run into the economic feasibility analysis, the area. The other thing that one other thing we're discussing with the state is, the way I interpret the regulations, the way it's written, it's not clear that you need to do an economic feasibility analysis in order to expand the 40R district, where you do need to do one for an entirely new district. So, sorry.
So I thought it was clear that we didn't. I thought we've always been saying that as long as we expand the 40R district, we have the 25%.
That is exactly our understanding, and we've been given that cue, it seems verbally.
Yeah.
But I was trying to make sure that there's no question or ambiguity there whatsoever with EOHLC on that point. So yes, that is the conclusion that we're operating under right now. But only because their time has been limited and we've been trying to get absolute focus of their attention on every, that is, we're hoping to confirm that definitively next week. But yes, that is the assumption, is that with the 40R district, you don't need to do that. They have essentially told us that that you don't need to do the economic feasibility analysis to justify the 25% in that expanded area. You will need to do that in the other reason. Generally speaking, Ian from MVPC was noting that as they're doing it, a bunch of these others, that they're seeing that they're really having difficulty getting above 50%, and that's why I point back to Because the density goes in that too, if we are reducing our density or saying 20 or 30 units an acre, that's more likely that we're gonna get, either stay at like a 10% or get up to 15%, or probably not get to 20, right? So, again, that's not the only factor to consider, but it's one of those things, the way is, changing one of the parameters can affect another. So, changing how much density or height we feel comfortable with can impact whether or not we can require a higher percentage of affordable housing, because the state is saying you have to have enough density to require a developer to do that percent of the unit affordable.
So do we have a timeline for MVPC to work on the economic feasibility in
They're
that?
working on it right now, but in order to really give us a result at the end of the day, they have to know, and we're right in the middle of this right now, discussing for these areas, no, first of all, knowing if we could bring anything doing, but if we do one for say like the Emperor area, is that a 20 unit per acre? Is it a 30 unit per acre, right? Are there any other parameters that might impact that? But the analysis has got like a whole bunch of stuff that other factors that go into it, but in essence, we need to be able to be relatively clear about that. Otherwise, it's not the one we're gonna be submitting to the state, at the end of the day, or adopting. So we're gonna need to make sure we're comfortable with it. So if you're not feeling comfortable with where we're heading, like a 20 unit per acre, 30 or 40, or some other number you want to throw out, right now, I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume we're talking about like a 30 per acre, in, like, as we taper off, right? Like representing, we taper off. But if it's right around the train station, it's like our 40R, it might be 40 units an acre right there, but we need to be clear about that because it will impact whether we can require, that percentage of affordability, in that area. Outside the 40R, again, recognizing that the 40R itself, it's expanded, doesn't need that. We basically expand the map and they say, okay, there's a couple of other tweaks we gotta, minor things we have to tweak, but that's not something we would have to do.
So, so just getting back to this, actually, I don't want to dominate, but I am to dominate. I guess I kind of go along with what Alden said, with the caveat that I would prefer the 30 rather than the 40 units per acre for those 3 lots.
For the 3 lots.
Yeah, option D with basically the way you've outlined it here. I've never been really excited about including Heinz Way, but it's kind of a paper exercise to so how many, what do we have out there? We have like 20 units out there?
And that's also along the rail trail.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. So
But,
I guess that's,
and that sort of gives us a little bit of comfort on the buffer.
yeah.
But you're all in agreement of including highway at the end of the day, or, right, is it?
Oh, I'm only,
Not that it makes-
yeah.
maybe it doesn't
I
make
guess I'm more comfortable with it as a way to reduce the density of Parker Street.
Got it, okay.
Right. I think that's prudent.
Yes.
But
So,
it does give us more work to do to try to devise something for the Emperor site.
sure, so in this scenario right now, we're working with it's D at 187, right, which is 30 units an acre. We got the H, which is the Heinz Way, extends the sub-district B, 75 units. And then we're over to the Emperor version 2.
Do these figures, Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, sorry, do we have to work on the zoning, revising the zoning for the Heinz Way as well, or is that within the 40?
No, that would be just like doing the Parker Street area or anything else that's connected to the 40R can generally be a minor sort of adjustment and keep kind of the same parameters. So Heinz Way would be an expansion of the 40R district, the same way as something else would be. The last 2 on the table here are the map.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other options or scenarios or how do you think we should run through the model or that you feel more comfortable with? Are there any map areas that haven't been discussed at all that you think we should draw? See if it sticks at all. Doesn't have to be, I mean, there are other areas in the city too, if there's something similar option that you think that folks have missed this far. But generally speaking, there's only 3 eligible areas, which is downtown, 40R, and Story Avenue in general. So we're really talking about 3 areas of the state we consider eligible generally.
I think Story Avenue at this point in our timeline would be way too difficult to do.
And we really have to think through Story Ave. There's a lot, I think there's a lot to consider.
I agree, Charlie. Yeah, that's a lot of variables on that site.
So that practice is in here, that gives us the two remaining areas that would qualify under the state, right? So we're in this area of the city. And, you know, other than those lots, other than those areas, generally, is there anything else that anybody feels is missing?
I mean, the other thing you could think about, which nobody is, well, actually you can't think about it, never mind. I was gonna say, you could think about making multifamily housing, allowable by right in the central business district on upper floors. But then you have to change all of the zoning in the city because of all the overlay districts.
Well, that's like a hint a little bit of like what you'd be dealing with the Empro side a little bit, like it's not that we can't do it, it's just that we have to go through those types of things. For these other, or for another district, or for an overlay, if it's gonna match 40R, we gotta, you know, check that, but, we have to decide whether those are, you know, similar parameters, that would be more involved, let's say, the downtown area as a whole, you know, that whole area here would be more involved than, say, doing the Empro side. You know?
Empro doesn't have any overlay issues, I don't think, so.
Right.
Can you remind me with the New England development site, is that one within an overlay? Two, are there any plans that we should be cognizant of that perhaps fall into a category where we could use that, that region too, if we were to include it in our analysis?
Sorry, for which region are you referring?
Waterfront West.
Thank you.
Yeah, Waterfront West could be utilized, however, at least I have been operating under the assumption that similar like we were saying with Story Avenue and Low Street, that that's a pretty quote unquote sensitive area and that the community would have a lot of discussion about, and so I mean, I'm not even actually thinking about it primarily, but timeframe wise, the idea of resolving these issues and including Waterfront West to be based on the discussion over the years does not seem likely to me or logical to assume that would pan out well. But two, there's also other design controls, permitting, discretionary permitting or things like that that the community may want to reserve for that area. It's right smack dab in the downtown area. So to me, it seems intuitively that, and again, if people want to throw in a mix and we can do an analysis and map it and see how the rest of the group feels about it, but including that area and running the analysis on it, if it's not going to reach a 2/3 vote or even, you know, some majority vote with the council, because it's got a bunch of other issues laid with it, including here, making it as of right permitting. I don't know whether that is going to be viable. It certainly can be done, and I think the state would accept that as a viable location, not an issue. But I think the question is, can we realistically adopt zoning for the area, opening up all the issues and the debates that are, you know, what happened about what's
Right.
appropriate and how it all fits together. I don't know that that's realistic to assume here.
I think people would feel that was an end run around all of the political discussion that's happened over the last 10 years.
True. Yeah, good point. Okay. Then I don't have any other questions.
The only question I have is, and I think we touched on the last meeting, was about kind of notice to the parcel owners and how would that work if we're going to rezone a certain area that's industrial and has certain rights. How do you go about that? Because I think there's a, you know, no one likes to be surprised, and I'm not sure which parcels are owned by, you know, people local versus national that may not even be aware of it. And you'd hate to cause friction for no reason when you're thinking of accomplishing something like what we're trying to accomplish with the MBTA. So I'd just like everyone, or Rick, maybe your thoughts, and Andy, of how you go about that and what's, you know, we don't want to go overboard, but what's prudent in that regard.
So one thing to keep in mind, Brian, is that if we do it as a 40R district, it's an overlay and it doesn't take away any of the rights of the underlying industrial zoning. They're still allowed to go ahead and develop as if the overlay didn't exist. And so the overlay only comes into effect when they want to do multifamily housing. So it's actually expanding their rights rather than reducing their rights, because it gives them another option. But to your point, if, you know, say on Parker Street, if there are only 3 parcels, it's very easy to notify those parcel owners, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also just add, so I'm making an effort to reach out to each of these property owners, right? They're the ones who are actually controlling them, right? Not necessarily even the business that's there, but so landowner, business operation there, and touch base with folks. So I've started to do that along this Parker Street section. It happens to be that the gentleman who's got this the Empro site up here, we're really talking to the same people that are down on Parker Street here. So at any rate, thus far, when I did talk to Mark Ritchie, he was not concerned about his property being included or even other properties along the street, so to speak, being extended to 40R. He just wanted to make sure that we were approaching it in the same way we did with 1 and 3 Boston Way, which is, we recall in the permit, we required the developer to give notice to anybody who's moving in, and you know, if it was gonna rent, it was gonna be a for sale condo. We're gonna do the same thing with the deed restriction, but kind of like what we did with Evergreen Commons, with some of the water supply protection issues. But basically making sure all property owners or people living there knew that they're moving in, you know, next to a business park that was already there. It's grandfathered, it's established. And similar to say the homes that were on Colby Farm Lane, and when there was concern about a bunch of new homeowners, you know, being in this area and then complaining that the city had a bunch of operations down the street and didn't like all the trucks or public traffic, might not be reasonable for the new couple of homes to say that the whole city should change its operation, you know, because they've now moved in there. So in essence, he's okay with that, doesn't have any concern about it. Again, these people can speak for themselves, but David Cowie, who has these properties here, is interested, it seems like to me, not just sort of not opposed, but interested. And then you have, I'm still reaching out to these properties here. I have not yet been able to reach as well out and have conversations with these folks. But you know that this property is already interested in possibly housing, possibly other things, but to me, housing is the most appropriate use intuitively to me. But so at any rate, I 100% agree with that. We used to have a business park association that kind of fizzled out a bit. There's been 2 iterations of that over the decades, and there's not a current kind of strong business park association, so we have to do like these one-off outreaches to try to make you know, outreach. But I 100% agree with that, and think that's a valid consideration. At the end of the day, it's not the only factor, but it definitely is worth seeing what people think. And one thing, for instance, like some folks were debating whether or not this area impacts a lot of square footage of you know, space, whereas maybe, you know, this is like a bigger footprint in the building, but like this lot doesn't have a very big operation. So I don't know how every, you know, property owner will feel. But we have seen some transition of the Graf Road area to a degree, and we have seen the establishment of 40R. And I don't know that we're seeing the tension, at least right there. Not saying it's not gonna go down the street, but I just see it there right now.
Yeah, and I don't think, you know, to Rick, to your point, I mean, sometimes you're adding value, right, to the landowner. But I've also seen in a prior life, I've seen it can affect tenant relationships, because if something happens and this rumor starts, oh, this parcel is going to be developed multifamily housing, and then you'll see the, you know, anyone who's impacted, they want to move their business because they know it's an inevitability. So again, there's nothing you can do. You can't protect everyone from everything. But again, I think it sounds like you have an approach, and informal is good, but, you know, maybe at one of the hearings we're going to have, or when it's going to be launched, that they get invited specifically so that they can hear, you know, and have questions answered, you know, directly as a fact, not as a, you know, evolution, is just my only point. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but it was also, you know, you never know who's going to react adversely, and you just like to know that.
It's a great point, I agree with. Yeah.
Just a question on the 4th lot out on the Parker Street side.
This one?
That one there, given some of the options we're going further, but is that one mostly wetlands there?
Yeah, this one, as I recall, is mainly wetlands in here, and this one is almost entirely, this triangular one is almost entirely. And again, this partly comes to whether or not we're making a so-called contiguous district, if we're going across the street, or, you know, there's pros and cons for using a lot that it may not be. But wetlands, you know, the presence of wetlands may be a factor for whether or not it gets any unit count or whether or not we include it.
Right, that's why I thought that was a limiting factor to me from going.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
More well? Where are you landing on this?
I'm landing on the scenario that all described.
Yeah.
You know,
With the higher-
the 3 lots on Parker, plus Hines, plus the expanded Densboro.
And are you thinking about the higher density for the 3 lots in Parker, or the lower?
I think the lower is okay, it gives,
I think lower is okay.
gives us the count. Yeah, seems it would cover.
So, like this, the preferred scenario with this group right now, and I don't know if the folks online can join as well, but the working preference right now amongst these options is the D with 187, which is the 30 units an acre. Hines Way being added, which is the 30 units an acre extension of the 40R. And then the, Empro version 2 with the 30 units an acre, which is the 188. And you add that to our base 40R district and
the.
Where does that?
Can you point out and Pro V2 again? I forget where that is.
Give us a
Sorry?
range of
Just show the map of Enpro.
Oh, yes.
1450. Okay, we'll put-
Which one is it? Both?
It's all of the colored areas.
It's all the purple that you're seeing.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, on each map, it's just the purple highlighted lots.
And I would say, another advantage of doing something here is that it's, easy walking distance to, CVS and even the downtown, so it's a good place for
And the
higher
train
density
station.
housing.
Very centrally located.
Yeah, but this is the one where we have to consider zoning, right? Tweaking the zoning language, right?
Blue zoning for, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I agree too. I like that option.
And
Those
just as background, there's been some concern in the past about, this is what is this now, B3? What is the district we hit, that this is,
B3.
B3? And the fact that, right now it could be a drive-through business. And is that really what we want?
To me, residential makes more sense.
Yeah,
than
it's
any kind
much
of-
better to be residential. Anything else from anybody?
Any options that haven't been explored or additions or subtractions of lots that, you haven't seen vetted yet?
No, I'd be
guess-
just curious as to a recap of what we're kind of considering that. Are we drawing into a consensus?
Well, I guess that's the question. Just go back to the table again. It seems like those of us in the room are, kind of pretty much in consensus on the scenario that we were talking about with the 3 parcels on Parker Street, Hines Way, and the Enpro V2 that you just saw. I guess we'd just like to know your feelings, Charlie and Brian, as to whether you are also, in that direction, or whether you have some concerns or would like something different.
I like the way it models out. If it's feasible and we think that it won't be rejected by the MBTA.
My primary question with this is, again, just is, are we going to be able to, who's going to facilitate a adequate transition of this? We'll help to draft what we can.
Yeah.
But, I cannot guarantee when we go to committee with discussions over these different parameters, if you're not fully cognizant of the fact that once we open up a discussion of this parameter or that parameter, it can sometimes open up a parameter, debate into 5 other parameters. We will need to herd those cats and maintain a course for a zoning change in that area that will not get bogged down and become cumbersome to actually submit to the state.
Your concern is Enpro still.
Sorry?
You're talking, when you say that, you're talking about the Enpro side.
If we're gonna do that, I just wanna make sure that we also mobilize a discussion that deals with those other parameters, because while it may seem convenient and good to do that here from one lens, we also have to do those other parameters.
What parameters are you talking about?
Well, any of the parameters are involved, so what are the parameters for height and
Oh,
setback?
okay, yeah, so I mean,
Or is it we're trying to match exactly the 40R to the extent they'll allow us to do it under MBTA? We need to clarify those things, because otherwise we can't proceed along with any of this, including preparing for our future meetings in the next couple of days and weeks, or submitting to the state, or at the end of the day, verifying what our build out's gonna be to match what we're seeing here.
what would you prefer? It sounds like you don't like this scenario, so what would you?
No, I'm just suggesting that I just don't know whether everybody's being fully cognizant of the, if nothing else, the delays that can happen from getting bogged down in a committee discussion.
Yeah, no, I get that, I guess,
Something like that.
I guess I'm trying to get some guidance from you as to what you would do differently.
Well, maybe there's a subcommittee, right, with the city council? For this?
There is. Unfortunately, the meeting was short the other night because it was overlapped with the budget and finance meeting, so we didn't get too much discussion with councils about it, but.
I guess it sounds to me like you're trying to guide us to put more stuff into the business park. as opposed to going out to input.
Well, again, and it's not my decision, there's a collective decision, ultimately speaking, it's the council will have to decide one or the other. It's just that I just want people to be aware and make sure that if we want to go this route, aren't also saying to ourselves several months down the road, we have not yet been able to reach consensus on the zoning parameters up there. We've now opened up a community debate about a zoning district that hasn't been discussed up there, in the past per se. We're now having that discussion for whatever reason this typically happens. People come out of the woodwork, have a concern about it, and then we bring that to a grinding halt and we stop again, and we can't proceed with that. And my concern here is we need just to be aware that there's more that comes with this than just putting something, a map boundary on the map. We have to have that discussion that has to proceed. If it gets bogged down and can't proceed, then this may not be a viable route. So if we're all good with that, we think that's gonna happen in a time frame that's viable, that's great.
Yeah.
But we have a couple of months, and I don't know whether or not everybody's fully anticipating those things, because each of those parameters will come up here. It's not quite the same as having the discussion that the council had years ago, which is 40-yard perimeters down by the train station. This is a different area in some ways. So I'm not opposed to it at all on the map. I'm fine with that. But we have to be.
Yeah, I think we understand what you're saying, Eddie. What if we were to do this? What if we were to give 2 or 3 options, and we, as a planning board, basically say this is why we would like this as 1, if we have to, we go to 2, and then I don't know, lesser extent 3. And then that way we can float the idea to them, because I get what you're saying, that we could find out right away if there's resistance or we feel like there's going to be uphill battle and then we miss the timeline. I think we're very cognizant of that, but at the same time, we're trying to balance it out with a little bit of future planning.
And I would just add to that the timeline's not created internally. It's created by an outside entity. And I hate to think we lack the planning vision because of a timeline and someone's discomfort, because we're all being imposed, the whole city government's being imposed by the same timeline, right? It's not artificial, it's real, but it's from the outside. I'll also say that other communities are struggling immensely with this because they don't have the flexibility that Newburyport has, right? So at the end of the day, I think we're lucky in some regards, but we also should, maybe Charlie, that's the best way to go. This is our best foot forward, but if you had a default for time or whatever else, there may be a drop back. But.
Right.
And I also want to make, from my perspective, this is not just about, well, it's time frame and so forth. It's all the factors. I'm just looking at the whole lens. If we're able to do that process, I just want to make sure we proceed along to answer it, because this was going to be part of our subsequent discussion of district mapping, was going to be what are the design parameters, are there any dimensional parameters, sort of drilling down deeper. When we were considering Low Street, Story Ave, there was a debate about do we have to adjust parameters over there. We were thinking about maybe modeling out the 40-yard, but adjusting parameters. As long as we allow time for that to happen, and it can happen through the process, I just want us to be aware, because I have seen no shortage of things, discussed in zoning that can get bogged down, it can go around in circles. And so if we're not able to actually fulfill that, it may not be realistic to head down that path. If we can do that.
Understanding all of the things you're saying, but if we want to make that recommendation, and we make that recommendation with the understanding that A, we think it's the right solution from a planning standpoint. B, it's the right solution, but it comes with additional process that I'll be clear about as we walk into this. But we think it's important that we get support for that process and move that forward, because we think this is the right solution in the end. And I would continue to push this on the positive side. I would be hesitant to give outs. Here's a second solution, and you don't like this one because there's a process. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
We really have to make a
I think
decision.
let's get behind this and let's say, look, there's a process, but we think we can push that.
So I think what would make sense for that then is, and I don't know if you'll want to digest and come back, but it might be good as well if you're able to convey to the zoning advisory group and the council, if there are any parameters, let's say, whether it's 40R, let's assume for the sort of MPRO area, or it's some other model, or parameters for that area. If we're able to, maybe it's a subsequent meeting for now, but being able to convey what we think those parameters should be, that will help a lot to make sure that we're able to proceed with the economic feasibility analysis, with drafting zoning, that does this, with vetting with the rest of the group to make sure there's enough consensus among the council, because they're the ones that have to vote on it. That we're able to vet those other parameters so that we don't run into a situation in which, unfortunately, someone says, well, we didn't have time to vet the different, dimensional parameters or other things that are coming along with this. And if we're able to point out those things and include those pieces of it, we can make sure that everybody's also comfortable with those parameters. So that the EFA, the economic feasibility analysis, lines up with that. All issues have presumably been worked out. We've got enough, consensus among the council. And we're not running into a situation in which we haven't addressed those other pieces. So whether or not we're able to do that tonight, I don't know if we have enough consensus of what you think the parameters should be. But if it isn't, model off the 40R, for instance, we should discuss those parameters and be able to clarify only to the extent that it will impact either our build out or, the package that we have to prepare for the council.
If we start with saying that we model it after the part B of
Yeah.
the 40 and 40R and say that's our base and
Yeah.
that,
That's helpful. Are there any other if there's anything else that stands out, that'd be helpful to know. To me, that's very straightforward and, very helpful to know. And we'll be able to allow us to run with it. But if there's variations depending about that, it'd be helpful to know, just so we're not, heading off course.
I think we should keep it as simple as possible.
That's what I would think.
I would say, if we can say, it may not be a 40R subtype B, but it's like that.
Right.
That's the,
Okay,
the standards that we would use to design it
Nice.
and to do the economic feasibility analysis on. And I think that we should, I really think that we've run out of time. This week, we're running out of time to make any other changes. So we really need to make a recommendation. If the council, if it goes to the council's planning and development committee and we hear that that's a bad recommendation from their point of view, then we need to quickly regroup and add more parcels in the business park, which we don't want to
if
do.
there's consensus amongst the group
Are we,
there.
are we allowed to have special meetings in these cases?
Sure, yeah, we can schedule a special meeting. I was actually wondering about that myself.
I'll defer to Councilor Shan, it's her committee, but I don't know if there's any interest in having it doesn't need to be a joint meeting per se, but if there's a joint meeting or at least members attending together, one thing that does is it gives us the benefit of the, overlapping conversations.
It does, but the more people, if we're not, I think it's better to try to refine what we've been talking about.
Yeah,
Up to you, but I think it's a clear message to say we've done all this analysis.
Yeah.
And here's our recommendation to the council.
Yeah.
Rather than, because I can see the other meetings taking a lot of time.
I like where we're headed. I like DH and J personally. I like the whole thought process of business planning. I like J because that site needs to be developed. And I think we should do our due diligence now to do something with it and include it as part of the MBTA communities, because here's a great opportunity to do it. My question is that going to be an overlay district? Or is it something else? And I mean, I'm gonna, before you start it,
yeah, sure.
it does need to be said concisely and simply. It's like, if we're gonna do this, it's gonna be this, and this is the process. Keep it simple, because as soon as we start.
Yeah.
I can see it now, because you got 11 of us,
Right,
and I only need 6.
right.
But
It's a great point. I mean, I guess my inclination is for the Emperor site, I think it makes more sense to, in some ways, just make it the underlying zoning. However, when we think about the other lots that are included there, that is a little bit more awkward.
I think the easiest thing is gonna be overlay district.
Yeah, and for that reason, I think what we do is we make it the overlay for the 40R for the whole thing. In this case, because of that, and not so much because I think the Emperor site is a problem for the underlying district, but the others are potentially. So I think what we do is we then just go to make sure we've corrected any conflicting overlap with the underlying district. And we take out, for instance, the commercial component, of that to sort of discourage that and encourage it.
I mean, there's one thing we could, there are two ways to do it, I think. One is to change the underlying zoning of the B3 district and create an overlay district for the other part, the resident, but there's 3 different zoning districts, right? We've got the
Correct.
business, we've got residential, and we've got,
Industrial.
and so to merge all those together, the easiest, we could try to be fancy about it but I think it's better it's easier to explain what we're doing in one section of the zoning ordinance.
thank you.
So I mean, so 2 things. One is, I'd like, was it Charlie who asked about a special meeting?
Yes,
I'd be happy to talk about that, I don't think we're prepared to talk about it tonight. Because I don't think we've thought about, gone to the 40R zoning and looked at it to see how it applies to that site. But I think we could, potentially, either, because when we meet again in 2 weeks, don't we?
Yeah, I guess one question might be, and again, Councilor Kane, you can chime in if you're not on this, but is there any benefit? Would you want to clarify your, would you want to comment on your recommendation here, knowing that we have forthcoming comments or thoughts on that? Or would you want to hold off until you've got those pieces that, I'm assuming here you want to convey, just because of the time frame, it's trying to cycle with others. I don't-
Planning and development next week on May 7th?
No,
When?
so our next meeting is, you would ask for that. No, we are, the week after council. So we are,
14th or Tuesday.
no, you're right, May 7th,
Right.
sorry.
So if we talked about this at our next regular meeting and gave
Right.
our homework assignment to really come up with some stuff,
Yeah.
we would have stuff to report to planning and development on the 7th.
Yeah, which.
now with the first, right? May 1st.
What's that one first?
Yeah, it would be great. What I'm trying to do here is as best as possible, sort of align these, as best as possible, these discussions with planning board, city council, zoning advisory group. So there's enough consensus amongst the sort of collective here that as we come out, we're all feel reasonably comfortable with where we've ended up. So if you want to, if you're able to sort of package that piece together and we can include some clarity, further clarity, if we're, working off that 40R template, if it's a 30 units an acre, if there's any other parameters we could adjust. Recognizing it here, it may not be a formal 40R submission to the state, right? But any of those kind of parameters, that way, not only for the EFA, for the modeling side of it, but also for the rest of the discussion of others who are not here with us, that they can be fully aware, they can be brought up to speed, and they can chime in if they have any questions or concerns with that trajectory. And if we're good with it, we can keep marching along, but ideally, if there are concerns, there are gonna be roadblocks, we would have those flagged early, so we're not, well, the rest of us spinning our wheels on something that doesn't apply at the end of the day.
So I could take a stab at drafting this overall recommendation and coming up with some proposed standards for the Info version 2 district, and then give it to you, and you could distribute it to the entire board, so we would have something that we could discuss on our meeting on the first.
That'd be great.
Does
And
that
we're
work?
talking Zach Mark too, right?
We can update, yeah, does that make sense for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
And ZAG is basically meeting, and the plan is to meet every week, other than when there's a traffic safety advisory committee meeting, so we can kind of keep moving along with that group as well. So, recognizing that the city council and planning board are only meeting every
So
2
they're gonna have 2 meetings, after the meeting tomorrow and another meeting before our next meeting.
Right, hopefully everybody will be sufficiently on the same page.
So we can, if I'm fast or what I'm working on this, I can maybe have something for the second ZAG meeting.
Right, gotcha, and but we can still get at least a verbal kind of, update, to where things are tracking tomorrow with the group.
yeah, let's just feel everybody out more.
Yeah.
But I like this group, but I'm going to, we can certainly work on getting the other 5.
Get them on board.
Get 5 done.
A few of them haven't commented at all, so we might have to, continue, for myself as well, but, individual outreach, just to, we want to make sure we get feedback from everybody as early on as possible, and if they haven't chimed in yet, we get to, touch base with it.
Yeah, and I'll touch base with Keith specifically since it's all really great.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And I'm hoping, I didn't hear, I don't know definitively, but I'm hoping to be in tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Okay,
great.
we've made some progress tonight.
So everybody knows where to find the 40R district, and if you want to look at those parameters, also, you can also look at, of course, recognizing the district, you can also just look at, by comparison to the existing business district, what that zoning, allows if you wanted to think about it from that framework or a different angle. But I think here, when we're thinking about it from the 40R, I would start with that and come back with, I would add this, I would delete that, I don't feel comfortable with this, I do feel comfortable with that, or I would,
I think you did such a great job the first time, I think we can just copy it.
Right.
That's great.
Okay, well, this is really helpful, and again, wherever we end up, it's very good to have consistency regardless of what that is, so we'll see where the rest of the group ends up with this.
I think it's just a matter of, you know, not making it too complicated and just saying, here's, you know, here's what we came down with, and here's how we made our decision, and not even talk about so much all the other permutations, because the more permutations we have,
Right.
the more discussion, the longer it's gonna take to discuss it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We are
Keep,
looking at
keep it
our-
light.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, I mean, this is being optimistic, but if the zoning advisory group tomorrow were to say, we agree with the exact same scenario, and we had a full, attendance or, a good turnout, and both the planning board and that group are recommending back to the city council, and the city council that is able to sort of get on those on the same page there, that would be a great situation, because it would be, sort of that endless circle of pain, so, but it remains to be seen.
Okay. Is there anything else? We don't need to talk about Story Avenue at this point, do we?
No, we will be circling back on this, but obviously for good reason, we're having everybody's bandwidth focused on this issue so we can, to confirm our approach here. Again, I don't think anybody's bringing that area up again for this purpose here, but we do need to make this decision, which has been your timeframe than the other one, so. So we have that accurate fiscal year work on that one, so we are gonna be circling back on this one, we're gonna get into details of that, we're gonna get into consultants coming in and talking with us at pieces of this, vision that area, modeling it, so we need to complete this first.
Yeah.
I would like to kick off that process before the summer, and this is typically sort of a recess before the committees and the council and everything, so I'd like to try to initiate some of that before that timeframe, right, not miss that, but at the same time, we do need to do this first.
You don't have a contract yet with the consultant?
No, we're actually going back and forth over the scope to tweak a few things.
Is the Kennedy School?
Oh, yes, sorry, they are doing some things, so they're looking at the economic feasibility analysis, they're looking at fiscal impact analysis or impact on the community. And they're creating some 3D visualization or modeling to kind of show sort of massing lines, and we just know that.
They'll share that with us?
Sorry?
They'll share that with us?
They will when they're done, yeah, we've only seen during Zoom meetings like snapshot kind of what they're working on, but so, and I'm recognizing this is only one semester, it's not the whole class is that it's 6 students or so. So bottom line is we'll be grateful for what they produce. It will be potentially useful to us in our discussions here about fiscal impact or about with the state about the EFA. And we'll see how that aligns with the MVPC piece, but in some comparison, but that stuff would be helpful to us one way or the other with that area. It's fine. I'm actually particularly interested in the modeling side of it. I think being able to illustrate. I'm interested to see what they come up with there. So.
Any other updates you have?
I think so. Well, sorry, my mind is so full of the MVPs stuff.
Do you have any awareness of any potential applications that might come to us for the May 1st meeting?
Oh, I'm not right now. No, we can touch base.
There's just no whispers or anything at this point that somebody's.
Not that I'm aware of. We talked about ZBA a couple of applications.
Okay, so we actually may have another full meeting to work on this stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
And if there ends up
I
being.
won't,
We won't be here.
I won't be here on the first.
Oh, okay, all right. If you want to give any feedback before then or anything else between now and then, do. Otherwise, if there are other scenarios that result in a different version of this table or other things that come out from the other groups, obviously, I keep sort of planning to circle back with the other groups. So, I keep you in the loop and say, all right, this is where the zoning advisory group is turning, or this is the county, we'll kind of circle back, but, this will be really helpful to tomorrow's discussion to be able to have the planning board input as well as, so at least a little bit of what we got yesterday.
And I think, it would be helpful to tighten up the presentation for this ag meeting, because, if we could just get over the hump of saying, here's one scenario that the planning board fully endorses. Do you have do you have any concerns with it? If we can get to that point, instead of analyzing each one as we go through, then we might get a little bit further ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it can be pointed out to the group right off the bat that the blue boxes here, these 3 highlighted, are the ones that the planning board landed on, and then if folks want to go to these others, we can spend time with them.
Show map,
What's that?
show D, H, and J on the map.
Yeah.
One map.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, no, I-
Together. and then
Yeah,
the
it's
picture.
like, this is what they
Yeah,
recommended.
yeah,
That'd be
We're
good.
gonna start the rail trail.
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm with her on that.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? In that case, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
moved and seconded. Alden,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and I vote yes also. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks, for making time to be here, even if you were somewhere else.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. Good to see you.
See you.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Brian.